be a screw, feel my own adrenaline. Yeah, I do just what I do, and I hope you let me in, yeah.
Hello and welcome back, fellow anime lovers, to Cypherfics. I am delighted to have you join us once again in the world of fanfiction and fantasy. This is the fourth part of What If Rias, Akeno, Issei enter Attack on Titan. Special note, this fanfic is written in a masterpiece of reading dangerously on FANFICTIONnet. Do check and support the author too. Now smash the like, share and subscribe button for more. Also press the bell icon so that you never miss such great parts. Thanks for the introduction. Now let's dive into the world. Buchu means well, Kiba told Issei as they walked through the small forest behind the occult research club. She's not trying to limit your freedom or anything, but going near a church like that is risky. Devils, angels, and fallen angels have been at war for thousands of years. Even now, during a ceasefire, it isn't rare for each side to kill the other with the appropriate pretense. I was just helping Asia, Issei defended himself with a frown at the blonde boy. The damn handsome. Who is the enemy? Kiba pointed out, but not unkindly. If you had actually stepped foot on church soil, then any priests would have an excuse to kill you, and there would be nothing Rias could do to get justice for you without restarting the war or putting all of us at risk. It's the perfect place to lure a new devil to kill them before they grow in power. I don't understand all this, Issei rubbed his hair with frustration. It wasn't some sort of trap. Asia wouldn't hurt a fly. She was super kind. She healed this kid in the park and didn't even complain when his mother was rude. Healed? Kiba paused in his tracks. He stared at the other boy with an intensity that Issei didn't like. Issei wasn't like that. He liked boobs. It was just a scrape. Issei shuffled uncomfortably under the blonde's gaze. Said it was a blessing from God. Oh, gah, I'm still getting used to that. Anyway, it's a sacred gear, right? Like mine. Probably, Kiba said absent-mindedly, seeming lost in thought with a deep frown. But healing sacred gears are rare, as in only a few every generation rare, for the church to bring one to Kyo and with the fallen in town. Kiba trailed off in thought, and this time, Issei's shuffling was for an entirely different reason. Would you die for me? A phantom pain lanced through his chest, even though the wound had healed days ago. Anyway, Kiba shook himself out of his thoughts. I'll tell Reyes about this later. For now, you need to be aware that just because someone from the church seems nice doesn't mean they are. You only spent a bit of time with her. Asia could have been faking it, trying to get you to lower your guard. But aren't nuns supposed to be nice? Issei tried to dredge up what little he knew of Christianity. Most of his exposure to nuns came from porn. While Issei wasn't the brightest, even he knew porn was not reality, so he delved back to his childhood. His friend had been Christian, but most of the lessons and lectures had flown over his head in favor of playing games. He remembered some lessons about the Bible and stuff, but it had never seemed important. When would you need to use biblical knowledge in daily life, if you didn't believe it? It is not as simple as that, Kiba explained patiently. Not all devils are bad. There are some bad apples, and you must be careful when dealing with most pure blood devils, but some, like Buchu, are kind. The church are not the good guys either. Something in the knight's voice caused Issei to flinch. They've done terrible things. Everyone knows about the crusades and witch hunts, but they've gotten away with much worse in the supernatural world that's never taught in school. Issei was sure Asia wasn't like that. Something about the girl, a vulnerable nativity, convinced Issei that the blonde nun wouldn't hurt anyone. But Kiba had never met her, and Issei didn't know enough about the subject to argue the point. On top of that, Kiba was trying to help Issei, to teach him about this world he had been thrown into as he had been doing all week. It had been Kiba who met him the day after his reincarnation. Issei had been searching desperately for proof that Yuuma had been real, and Kiba brought him to Buchu, who explained things. Now Issei Hyodu, one of the perverted trio, was part of the famous occult research club and working on the basics of being a devil to become a high-class devil and gain a peerage. Issei now had a viable path to becoming a harem king, and the other boy in the club had been the most helpful of his new companions so far. Kiba spent time guiding his fellow second year, answering his questions, and helping him try to practice with his sacred gear. It had been Kiba who helped the pervert teleport to his first contract and waited outside while Issei tried, unsuccessfully, to make his first deal. When Issei had asked why the boy was doing all this, Kiba had given that damn handsome smile, shrugged his shoulders, and said something about getting to know a new comrade and a few light mumbles under his breath. Issei appreciated the sentiment, even if he didn't know what weights had to do with anything. Issei would have also preferred it if Hajime-senpai or Buchu guided him. They had magnificent oppai, but they seemed super busy, so he didn't hold it against them. Kaneko-chan was super cute too, but she didn't seem to do much, and she was brutal in calling him out. Despite being a damn handsome, Issei could grudgingly say he was coming to like Kiba. So he followed the blonde when he asked Issei if he had any free time. Since he didn't know how to argue about Asia, Issei instead asked the question that had been bugging him for a while. "Where are we going?" "I'm going to introduce you to Senpai," Kiba said, restarting his walk. "Senpai?" "Erenyeager. He isn't actually a student. I just call him that. It's a bit complicated." The blonde gave an awkward smile. "Think of him as our club's advisor and friend. We go to him for advice, talk, or spend a relaxing afternoon." "A devil therapist?" Issei asked, surprised such a thing existed. "No, Eren is human. There are devil therapists, but he isn't one. He doesn't even know about the supernatural, so don't bring it up." Kiba gave Issei a look that had the pervert nodding quickly. "If he's normal, what advice can he give?" Issei struggled to slot this new piece of information into the puzzle that was his new life. So much was happening so fast over the last few days. His first girlfriend was a fallen angel who killed him on their first date. Devils were real, and he was now one. He had power now, some sort of secret power-up like in Dragon Ball. The church and all its members, including the cute girl he helped, might try to kill him. And now he found out devils went to regular humans for advice. "You'd be surprised," Kiba's smile tightened slightly. "Eren's been through a lot. Even if you don't follow what he says, he gives us a unique perspective to understanding our problems." "I don't know," Issei hesitated. "Most of my questions are about being a devil. I don't think he can help." "You don't have to ask him anything," Kiba said with a pat on Issei's shoulder. "Kaneko doesn't. Most of the time they're together, they're just napping and not talking. As I said, he's a friend. I just figured I'd introduce you now. Better this way than if you stumble on him by accident. The last time we surprised him. Well, better he knows you just in case." "So he goes to Kyoto University?" Issei asked, starting to get curious as they neared the halfway point between the two institutions. "And jealous. Napping with Kaneko-chan, the lucky bastard." Issei bet he was another damn handsome. All the people he had met these days were either beautiful or handsome. Issei was sure being related to the supernatural made someone at least an 8 on the hotness scale. "He's old enough but isn't currently in school," Kiba hedged. "He is still learning Japanese and isn't traditionally educated. As I said, he's had an interesting life. If you want, I'll tell you more later, but here we are." As they turned a corner on the path through the wooded park, Issei saw where Kiba had been leading him. It was a small clearing in the dense foliage of the trees, allowing the spring sky to shine down on a bench and its occupant. The bench was plain and boring, consisting of wooden planks held together by iron bands. The luxurious extra amenities around it highlighted the commonness of the bench. A canopy with a flat, retractable solar-paneled roof had been set up to provide shade and give power to what looked like a small heater below the bench and a mini fridge. Behind the setup, a few hammocks had been strung between the trees. It looked less like a bench in a park and more like some sort of long-term camping area set up by rich people. But the occupant on the seat held Issei's focus more than the amenities around it. It was an older boy, sleeping with his back reclined against the bench, a cane lying across his lap. His facial features were obscured by thick bandages wrapping around the top half of his head. Long, dark brown hair fell to his shoulder. He wasn't wearing the Kyoto uniform but regular clothes that hung lightly on a skinny frame to be healthy. He didn't look like a damn handsome like Issei had feared, but like a nursing patient who escaped the institution. "Senpai," Kiba called to the sleeping boy as they approached. He wasn't shouting, but his voice carried, and the blind boy woke with a start, hands tightening on his cane. "Yuyudo?" Eren asked, relaxing slightly and facing their general direction. Who's with you? I don't recognize those footsteps. This is Hyodu Issei, Kiba introduced as he gestured to Eren. Issei, this is Yeager Eren. Pleased to meet you, senpai, Issei said with a formal bow. Then he froze and stood up straight again, feeling very foolish. I'm not your senpai, Eren said simply, his Japanese halting and accented but understandable. Issei noted that his voice had no particular inflection, as if he had no emotions. Call me Eren. Yes, Sen Eren, Issei nodded, not used to the habit of using first names right away, but Asia had been like that too, so it wasn't entirely new. Issei is the newest member of our club, Kiba explained lightly as he took a seat on the bench. There wasn't a lot of room left, so Issei just stood there awkwardly rather than crowd the pair, wondering what to do with himself. I'm sure Rias told you all about him. She did spend a few hours bragging about him, yes? Eren somehow made his voice even more deadpan, but Issei couldn't help but puff his chest out in pride. Really? He asked, eager to know what Butchu had told the older boy about him. He hadn't gotten a lot of time to spend with his king, even if he would love to. She was seriously hot. What did she say? That you are honest, cheerful, and have a lot of potential, Eren answered with a shrug. Issei stood taller, pride filling his chest. Also, you are a massive pervert, want a harem, and have much to learn. Issei wilted slightly. He wasn't embarrassed about being a pervert or his dream, but to hear it put so bluntly was kind of insulting. Though he did agree, he had a lot to learn. That about sums him up, Kiba nodded with a chuckle that had Issei shooting him a glare. He took back all the good things he had thought about the blonde earlier. Reijus should explode. Rias also said you got hurt recently, Eren continued. Ah, Issei looked to Kiba for advice on what to say, not knowing what Butchu told the young man. The blonde gave a shrug. Yes, but Butchu helped me. Rias said as much, Eren nodded but with a frown. I prefer to verify things than trust one side of a story, even if it comes from friends. Kiba's polite smile widened at Eren's words, though Issei didn't know why. But you are all right now? Happy with your situation? Again, his words were halting and slow, but Issei got the gist. Would you die for me? Yes, Issei declared passionately. I am super happy. Butchu is great and so is Hajime-senpai. Kaneko-chan might have small oppai and be a little mean, but she's the school mascot and super cute. Kiba's alright, I guess, for being a damn handsome. There was a pause as Eren tilted his head. I only understood part of that, the blind boy admitted, speaking in English to Kiba. What does oppai mean? And kuso? Oppai means breasts, Kiba answered without a hint of shame. Kuso is a swear, though not a serious one. The best translation is damn. I am not surprised you didn't learn them, given your teacher. Feel free to speak English. Issei will understand you. Sorry, Issei said with another bow of apology. Then he was embarrassed again since Eren couldn't see it. I answered without thinking. It was still hard to control language. With Asia, it was easy since she only spoke Italian to him and 1 or 2 words of Japanese. Still, Eren had been trying to talk in Issei's native tongue with some limited success, so he had responded instinctively. It's fine, Eren said with a sigh. I need the practice, but I understood enough. At least you aren't being forced into anything. It was a surprise to be invited, Issei admitted hesitantly, wondering what was okay to say and what wasn't. And I am still getting used to everything. It's new, confusing, and scary, but I am happy Butchu rescued me. Rescued? Eren said with a tilt of his head, and Issei winced at the slip. Rias found him pretty hurt, Kiba hurried to explain. He could have died if she didn't get there in time. Thankfully, she got him to a hospital in time. From what she told me, she felt like it was her fault, Eren pointed out. Did she hit you with her car? That happens a lot in Japanese schools, as I understand it. Kiba chuckled, but Issei looked confused at the pair. Butchu had apologized that she hadn't been paying more attention to the fallen, but Issei didn't really understand how it had been her fault. It was you. Would you die for me? Rainer's fault. Butchu helps him learn Japanese by reading light novels and manga to him, Kiba explained to Issei before returning to Eren. Despite what she tells you, A real school in Japan has very little in common with those. Issei didn't know about that. He was now part of a school club filled with devils after becoming one after his first girlfriend killed him. That sounded like a light novel to him. He hoped it was an ikai harem novel or a hentai rather than in the horror genre. I didn't know Butchu read manga, Issei said. What does she like? A bit of everything, Kiba shrugged. Rias is a massive Japanophile. Has been since she was a child. It was not Eren who spoke, but a feminine voice coming from behind Issei that made him jump in surprise. Whirling around, he noticed that Sauna Shitori, the student council president, had somehow managed to sneak up on him. The other two boys didn't seem surprised. Kaichu, Kiba greeted as he stood from the bench. Issei echoed him a moment later. Sauna, Eren nodded at her. You're later than usual. I have a new member in the council, she apologized without actually apologizing. He needed guidance with his tasks. Yuyudo, I see you are introducing Hyodu to Eren. Good initiative. Will you two be joining the lesson? I am afraid I have more to help Issei with. I just wanted to let them meet, so I will leave you two alone, Kiba said. Come on, Issei, let's head back to the club. I'll talk to you later, Eren. Very well, the girl nodded. Let Rias know we will do formal introductions between our new members at a later point once they are both settled in. Kiba gave a polite bow and headed back to the clubroom. Issei, still surprised by the sudden and unexplained appearance of the older girl, gave a hurried goodbye to Eren and a bow to Sauna before hurrying to follow Kiba. She goes by Sauna Shitori in Japan, but her real name is Sona Citri, Kiba said once they were far away. She's the other Devil King in Kyoto, and the student council is her peerage. She and Butchu are childhood friends and rivals. She rules the school by day and Butchu by night. Are there any more devils in Kyoto? Issei couldn't help but ask, worried now. A few, but none that you need to worry about, Kiba patted him on the back. Both of them are here to gain some independence and fill out their peerage, so the territory is pretty much theirs until they finish their studies. What was she doing with Eren? Teaching, Kiba said with a smile. She was the one who first met Senpai and started tutoring him in Japanese. Don't say anything about it to her, but we are all pretty sure she has a crush on him. That lucky bastard, Issei shook his fist at the sky. A beauty like that, God, I am so jealous. Don't ever say that again, Kiba cautioned, and Issei froze at the gravity in his voice. You shouldn't be blindly jealous of people without knowing what they went through. And definitely don't say anything like that about Eren around the others. Sorry, Issei said softly, chastised. It's fine. You didn't know, the blonde sighed. It's no secret, but Eren is sick and getting worse. He only has about a year to live. What? Issei asked, shocked. Can't Butchu heal him like she did me? It's not that simple, Kiba sighed regretfully. The short answer is that neither Sona nor Rias can make him a peerage member at the moment. Apart from evil pieces, we devils have very few healing abilities. We've been looking for a cure or way to heal him for over a year now, but no luck. Damn, that sucks, Issei cursed. He was jealous, sure, but he didn't want people to actually die. Do you think Asia could heal him? Maybe, Kiba hedged. I actually wanted to stay longer and let you get to know each other, but I need to talk to Butchu about that, and she'll want to hear from your perspective. As I said, healing gears are very rare, and the church is extremely protective of them. A nun healing someone on behalf of a devil, that is extremely unlikely. She'd do it, Issei said instantly. She's nice like that. Kiba didn't say anything but didn't look convinced by Issei's words. Still, the quick introduction and departure only gave the new rook more questions about the boy on the bench. It was a scene right out of a horror movie. The body of the client Issei had been sent to, Kaneko recognized, was crucified to the wall of his house. His limbs spread wide, and his face frozen in a silent scream of pain that told her he had not died quickly. The smell was the worst. Blood, old and new, filled the air, and that was some of the more pleasant scents. It made Kaneko angry. Minato had been kind. Most of his requests usually revolved around having Kaneko help with moving things he couldn't do to his bad back with her enhanced strength. And he baked some fantastic macaroons. Kaneko wanted to punch someone. Minato hadn't deserved this. The culprit was the madly cackling man waving around a light sword and gun in priestly robes, making rude gestures from behind his compatriots' backs. Whoever this fallen priest was, he was clearly a psychopath, and Kaneko shuddered at the thought of what he might have done to Issei and the girl he was blocking if Kiba hadn't been there to call for backup and Issei didn't have a rook's durability. 4 fallen, 3 women and a man, stood opposite the Gremory peerage. Issei was behind his comrades' backs. A blonde nun clutched protectively in his arms as he angrily glared at the black-haired woman. Kaneko was sure Buchu had said her name at some point, but she hadn't been paying attention. Mooks didn't get names. "We are not leaving without the nun," the black-haired woman said with a smirk, a lance of light in her hand. "You can't take Asia." "Issei," Rias cut off the rook with a chastising look before returning her attention to their enemies. Kiba softened the blow slightly by patting him and the blonde nun on the shoulder. Asia just watched everything with wide eyes and tear marks on her cheeks. "I am well within my rights to kill all of you right now." "You can try, bitch," the Gothla leader Reject laughed derisively. Kaneko was going to punch that one's teeth down her throat. Rias didn't get angry, at least on the surface. Kaneko knew her king was absolutely livid inside, but was maintaining control for the moment. "I have already alerted your superiors of your previous actions in my territory," Rias said, her voice a careful monotone, unlike her usual passionate speech pattern. Her face was also wholly blank. "The killing of a client and harming one of my peerage on top of it are reason enough to do whatever I wish." Kaneko smirked slightly at the unnerved look in the fallen's eyes. The rook liked Eren. She really did. But there was no denying his way of speaking could be off-putting. Not all the time, and it was getting rarer these days, but sometimes it was like he was completely empty. Like all joy, hate, or emotion had been drained from him by the beatings of the world. And when that expression was directed at you, it was like your entire existence was irrelevant. As if you were nothing but a bug to be crushed underfoot. It made for an excellent intimidation tactic, even if Rias would have to back it up a bit more. These fallen seemed especially stupid. "Big talk from a bunch of kids," the man in the trench coat sneered. Kaneko had been warned about people like him. She hoped he was wearing clothes under there. She already had to deal with one pervert on a day-to-day basis. Well, 2. Akeno was a different kind of pervert. "I will give you this last chance," Rias declared impassively, crimson orbs of destruction centimeters thick filling the destroyed living room. They floated in the air like red raindrops, and the fallen stepped back at the sight. There were hundreds of them in the destroyed room. "Leave. Leave the nun. Leave this house. Leave my territory. Leave with your lives." The black-haired woman looked like she was going to argue, a snarl forming on her lips, but the other fallen with blue hair placed a hand on her shoulder and whispered in her ear. "The ritual," was all she said. Kaneko's sensitive ears picked it up, and it was likely for that reason they kept their words to a minimum, out of caution that the peerage had someone like her. Enhanced senses weren't rare in the supernatural world. "Fine," Head Mook snorted, whirling around and grabbing the crazy priest roughly by his neck. "We'll leave. For now." "Hey, let me go. I want to gut the effing devils, and the beach. I want her." The wacko priest continued to his stream of expletives as the fallen angels carried him by the neck as they fled through the hole they made in the house when they arrived. There was a moment of tense silence as the devils didn't relax their guard. "Dawn," Kaneko eventually spoke. Rias untensed, whirling around and pulling Issei into a hug. "I'm sorry I yelled at you, but don't scare me like that," she chastised the rook. Rias pulled the boy back, his face set in a derpy grin as she searched for injuries. "Are you hurt anywhere? Why didn't you run?" Eventually, she looked at her knight when Issei continued to not respond. "Kiba, what's wrong with him?" The blonde knight awkwardly scratched at his cheek, unsure how to reply. Kaneko didn't have that problem. "Pervert is being a pervert." "Opie," Issei murmured as if in a trance, a goofy smile on his face from the hug. Kaneko felt her point had been made, so she yanked her fellow rook away from their king. He stumbled but managed to regain himself to avoid falling to the bloody floor. "As long as you are okay," Rias sighed with a smile before looking around. "We should leave. I'll have a few agents come through, clean up, and make an official story. Let's head back to the club." I'm not leaving Asia, Issei said, standing in front of the nun who had watched this interaction with confusion. She hadn't understood the language, but recognized the intent and care in the room, which was at odds with how she expected devils to act. Bring her along, Rias said easily. The redhead turned to the scared blonde for the first time and spoke in her native tongue. We're not going to hurt you. Will you come with us? Asia looked at Issei, who nodded and stood up from her kneeling position. Blood was on her clothes, but she didn't seem to mind. She stammered. I don't want to sell my soul. We don't want your soul, don't worry, Rias reassured her. We just want to ask some questions, that's all. Like why you are with the fallen, Kiba said with an easy smile. You've been expelled, haven't you? Yes, Asia said, looking dejected. Kaneko elbowed Kiba in the side for being so blunt, and the knight grunted in pain. We should have killed them, Akeno argued as they left the building. Kaneko could still smell the lingering scent of ozone from the queen as they walked the streets. Teleporting with Asia wasn't possible, so they were walking as a group for safety's sake. We had justification, and there is no way they will let this go. I don't want to fight in the middle of the suburbs, Rias argued back, and not without knowing Issei's state. I am not worried about them. For now PSS. That is a mook line if I've ever heard one. Kaneko nodded sagely, glad her king was as good at identifying scrubs as she was. You saw how they looked at her, Akeno cautioned. They will not leave Asia alone, no matter the warning. I know, Rias sighed as she slowed slightly to walk closer to Asia and Issei. The blonde flinched, but Issei tried to reassure her it was all right. But an area filled with sleeping civilians is not the place for a showdown. Issei gained a point in Kaneko's book for how chivalrous he was being in this whole thing. Seeing how protective he was of the nun was quite cute. That still put him at a negative 999 points. Out of 100. Why are they so set on you? Rias asked the nun bluntly. Most healing spells of the church don't work on the fallen. What's your sacred gear? Kaneko wondered if spending so much time with Eren was a good thing or not. Her king was clearly taking after him with how blunt she was being. Twilight healing, the nun said softly after Issei gave her an encouraging nod. I see, Rias sighed as she and Akeno wilted slightly. Asia looked like she would cry, so the king hurried to answer. No, it's a good gear. Great, in fact, it's one of the best healing gears out there. There are only a few active users, and all factions are looking to recruit people with it. It's just. You can only heal injuries, right? Not diseases or sickness, Akeno interjected, getting a hesitant nod from the nun. One of our friends is sick. We had hoped you had a gear that could help him. Sorry, Asia apologized with a bow. Now Kaneko felt like they had kicked a kitten. The others also clearly felt that way, as even Akeno looked guilty. I think your gear is awesome, Issei interjected with a broad smile, trying to cheer her up. He exaggeratedly rotated his shoulder. I don't feel any more pain after being shot. You were shot, Rias whirled on her newest rook, looking him over more intensely than before. She noticed one of the holes in his uniform, over his left shoulder, was circular and covered in blood. To be fair, much of Issei was covered in blood from rolling around and scuffling with the fake priest before the rest of the Gremory peerage had arrived. That hole was one of many in his clothes, and there was no wound, so Rias hadn't missed anything. Twilight healing also works on devils? Kiba asked himself, but Kaneko heard him. Why didn't you tell me? Rias fretted over Issei, poking at his body for any other unmentioned wounds. Light energy is poison to us. Did he get you anywhere else? I'm all good now, Issei defended himself with his arms raised, not looking like he minded the attention at all. A pervert's got a pervert, after all. Asia's got me. Rias narrowed her eyes at the boy as if daring him to lie to her, but eventually accepted his words as the truth. Thank you for healing him, Rias said as she bowed to the nun. Issei's new, a bit clumsy, and a pervert. Hey! But he is my cute servant, nonetheless, so thank you for taking care of him. Asia stuttered, eyes wide with panicked surprise. No, I mean, Issei has been very kind to me, even if he is a devil. It was just the right thing to do. She said the last part with a flush on her face as she looked away, twiddling her thumbs in embarrassment. Still, thank you, Rias smiled cheerfully. Akeno nodded in thanks as well. Kiba smiled kindly at the blonde, and even Koniko gave the girl a thumbs up. The pervert was still a pervert, but she didn't want him to die for it. Just get kicked in the nads a few times. Asia looked utterly overwhelmed by this positive reinforcement, as if her worldview was being rewritten. See, Issei urged. Your gear is super useful. Much better than mine. I think Issei's glove is cool, Asia disagreed. All it does is let me punch things without hurting my hand, Issei rubbed the back of his head awkwardly. And since I'm a rook, I'm already tough enough, so it's useless. There, Rias patted his head consolingly. You just haven't awakened it yet. Once you do, I think you will be happy with your glove. The redhead and her queen snickered as if they were in on a joke that the others weren't. Meaning? Koniko asked with a frown, not liking being left out like this. I'll tell you later, Akeno smiled mischievously. Koniko nodded. That was fine, so long as she wasn't the last to know. Hey, it's my sacred gear, tell me, Issei protested. I don't want to get your hopes up, so you will have to awaken it yourself to find out, Rias denied. I'll just tell you that sacred gears are known to respond to emotions. Try focusing on what you really want. Issei took her advice to heart, closing his eyes and muttering to himself as he walked. Harem king, harem king, harem king. Koniko sped up a bit, so she was in front of the boy and held out one of her feet. Issei tripped, smashing his face on the pavement and getting chuckles from the rest of the peerage. Issei, Asia, on the other hand, rushed to aid the boy in rising to his feet. Her hand glowed green, and she pressed it against his face. Don't bother, Koniko said with an imperceptible smirk. He's a rook. He's not hurt. True enough, apart from some dirt, Issei stood unharmed after his fall. That was mean, Koniko-chan. Get good scrub. That got a few more chuckles from the group as Asia looked on in confusion. Rias must have taken pity on the poor girl because she decided to shift the topic. Do you know what you want to do? The redhead asked the nun. At her bewildered expression, Rias explained. You are technically my prisoner of war, but I don't have any plans for you. You can stay at our clubhouse in one of the spare bedrooms tonight, but eventually you will have to decide what comes next. The Fallen did not seem to want to let you go. Once they leave my territory, I'll let you go if you want to follow them. Or you can stay here. If I want to stay, Asia asked softly, looking at the ground. Do I have to become a devil? It would make things easier, Rias admitted. I think you would enjoy being in my peerage, and I want you to join us. Your gear is very useful, and I think we'll get along. But no, it is not a requirement. What do you want, Asia? Issei asked with far more gentleness than Koniko thought possible from him. I want to go to school, Asia said softly as if admitting to a sin. Then her words started to pick up speed, sounding more determined than ever. I want to have friends. I don't want people to be mean anymore. I don't want to hurt people. I don't want to return to the church with Fried, Mittelt, Kalawarna, Donasik, and Rainier. The peerage shared small smiles at the small, simple, selfish wish. They were devils, after all. Granting selfish wishes was their job. I can arrange that, Rias smiled kindly. Thank you, Asia bowed, tears in her eyes as Issei cheered. But nothing comes for free in the world, Rias cautioned. They had arrived before school by then, making good time as the client's house was pretty close by. There is a price for everything. I can make you a student, find you a home, help you make friends, and protect you from the Fallen. But you will need to do something for me. Hey, that's not fair, Issei complained. What do I need to do? Asia asked, eyes still wet with tears but looking far more determined than before. All I want you to do is to try to heal my friend, the one we told you about earlier. But, Asia looked sad and regretful. I really can't heal diseases. I've tried before, but I can't. Maybe not, Rias acknowledged. I just want you to try your best. Maybe you can't heal him completely, but you might be able to reverse some of the symptoms. Give us more time to find a permanent cure. Can you promise to do that? I can, Asia declared passionately. I'll do my best. I promise. Wonderful Asia, Rias said gently. I'll introduce you to him tomorrow. Until then, get some rest. Akeno, can you show her to one of the available rooms? Of course, the queen agreed. This way, I have some old clothes that might fit you. Asia looked at Issei briefly, but he just nodded for her to follow Akeno. Do you need me to teleport you home? Kiba asked Issei. It's pretty late, and your parents will wonder why you're covered in blood. I can get you in unseen. Thanks, man, Issei sighed in relief. Asia healed me, but I am wiped, and Isuo wasn't looking forward to that conversation. Get some rest as well, Rias frowned at the boy in concern. If you find any other issues, let me know immediately. Rogue priests are no joking matter for new devils. Will do, Buchu, Issei said with a salute as he and Yuyudo teleported away. Kaneko was also going to head to her place, but paused when she saw Rias's face as her king sat behind her desk to finish the paperwork she had been working on before getting the emergency call. Buchu? Kaneko asked. Oh, Kaneko, Rias said, emerging from her thoughts. Sorry, I thought you had left. Be safe on your way home, okay? I don't think the Fallen will pull anything tonight, but be careful just in case. The smallest of frowns crossed the Nekashu's face as she looked at her king. You all right? She asked the older girl. I'm fine, Rias said. She didn't look fine to Kaneko. Just a letter from my parents, that's all. Issei's recruitment has some implications I needed to inform them about. I'll give you the details tomorrow. For now, get some rest. Despite her king's assurances, Kaneko maintained a frown as she wished Rias a good night. Her last sight of the heiress, before she left, was of Rias holding a letter in her hand. Instead of reading it, she repeatedly tapped it on her arm, lost in thought. Rias stared out her window into the dark park and the bench that lay within. Akeno watched the rest of the peerage leave the little clearing with a frown as she set about cleaning up. Rias was consoling her new bishop quietly as they left. Asia was particularly distraught over her failure to heal Eren despite only meeting him today. Akeno was sad but unsurprised that even Twilight Healing, one of the best healing gears out there, couldn't help. There had been hope, but not a lot of it. Seeing Eren trying to interact with the naive and kind Asia had been funny. The queen got the feeling that Eren was not used to dealing with people who were genuinely that kind, as opposed to faking it as Akeno, and to a lesser extent, Yuyudo did. What's wrong with her? Eren asked bluntly as Akeno gathered the plates and silverware they had used for their lunch. It had only been a few hours, during which they had Asia subtly try and heal the blind boy. Asia is a dear, Akeno lightly chastised with a chuckle. She really was trying to help. I know none of you believe in that miracle healing shit. I am not just going to be healed suddenly because of a religious prayer. That's not how reality works. Well, as subtle as they could be. The official excuse was that Asia, a new student at the school and club member, had been a nun and faith healer before moving here. Rias claimed it was worth a shot, and despite his doubts, Eren had gone along after they all urged him to. Nothing they said was technically a lie, so even Eren, with his almost supernatural bullshit radar, hadn't caught on. Nothing had happened. Kaneko reported no change to his life force as it continued to dwindle. Nor had his eyes healed, his strength returned, or any indication of the healing having taken place. Akeno was seriously starting to suspect Eren wasn't simply sick but under some divine-level curse. Only the complete absence of any magic or power around him prevented that notion. They had been around him long enough that they would have noticed even the faintest trace if it was there. If it had worked, or at least healed the side effects, like his eyes, it would have been a perfect time to introduce him to the world of devils, magic, and so on. Rias had a whole speech planned and everything despite considering it to be a long shot. Akeno had seen her practicing it in front of a mirror. It mostly boiled down to, I am a super powerful devil heiress trying to heal you. Please don't die. And if you do die, please let me bring you back. Yada yada, power of friendship, yada yada, anime protagonist, yada yada, JoJo. It had been quite cute, even if Rias had referenced the manga. She read to Eren a bit too much, in Akeno's opinion. Shame she didn't get to use it. Is it so hard to believe she simply wanted to help you? Akeno reprimanded him again as she continued her work. Asia is a very kind girl. She sincerely believed she should have been able to help you. I believe she believes, Eren answered. But belief does not save people. Belief does not fill hungry stomachs. Belief will not kill your enemies. People do. I have seen people of faith before, and I can't stand them. Flock is but another word for livestock. Akeno didn't bother to hide a smile, knowing the blind boy couldn't see it. Eren was sometimes more devil-like than any of them. If medicine doesn't work, other options should be considered. Who knows what's out there? A miracle could happen. I know what's out there, Eren answered plainly, and no miracle will stop my death. Akeno's smile faded back to a frown. Eren didn't know about magic or the supernatural, so he would understandably hold that view. But the queen was tired of his cavalier attitude towards his impending demise. The conversation lapsed as Akeno fished up, storing the blanket. She put the leftovers in containers for Eren to take home later. What's bothering you? What do you mean? Akeno asked a sudden question. You're quiet. You've been quiet the last few days, and so has Rias. You didn't even tease Asia and Issei today. Akeno snorted a small, unladylike laugh. Eren was blind and only met the nun for a few hours today, but even he could tell the girl's crush on the perverted boy. Then again, Asia could do a lot worse. Despite his perversion, Issei was the Red Dragon Emperor of the generation. Even if he was the weakest holder of D-Drag ever, that would still put him firmly in the ultimate class once he grew a bit. On top of that, the boy was unbelievably sweet to the girl. As in, his friends and the school would literally not believe their eyes if they saw it. Not only had Issei largely kept Asia out of his perverted antics, but he had stood up for her and defended her against the Fallen when they came to reclaim her. Asia had tried to sacrifice herself to get them to leave him alone, but Issei had managed to awaken his gear in time to fend them off. Combined with his rook strength and durability, he had held them off long enough for Rias and Akeno to arrive and help finish them. Their aid and desire to stay with Issei had been enough for Asia to approach Rias about her open offer to join the peerage. It was an adorable story, like one of Rias' anime. A not-so-small part of the queen also liked the idea of the Fallen being some 2-bit mook in the story. Characters killed off in the first season to establish a romantic interest. Akeno would be genuinely happy for the pair if they ended up together. At least some people deserve to find love. Are you going to answer my question or sit there and sigh all day? Eren asked, tapping his cane on the ground impatiently. It's not my secret to tell, Akeno eventually said. Rias then, Eren nodded. Akeno smiled wryly as she once more reaffirmed how sharp the boy could be. Something to do with her family? She's been complaining about them a lot more than usual. It does, Akeno acknowledged, but didn't provide any details. If Rias didn't share, she wouldn't either. And since she hasn't told me, she doesn't think I can help with whatever it is, Eren sighed. It is something none of us can help with, Akeno said lightly. No, that wasn't true. They all could help. They could and would fight Riser in a raiding game. That was where this was leading, after all. It was a transparent ploy Akeno, and her king could see coming a mile away. Ria's family was pushing the engagement forward, despite their promises to wait till she graduated, because they feared her new peerage members. The Red Dragon and its hosts had killed numerous members of the Phoenix clan in the past, and giving Issei time to grow was a surefire way to ensure Rias was strong enough to get out of the deal by the time the original deadline arrived. They had been content to let Rias finish her schooling, confident that the rebelliousness of youth would wear out as she grew and came to accept their decision. There had been no binding agreement for that promise, so nothing stopped them from deciding to change the date on a whim, except their genuine care for their daughter and desire to have her see things their way. The boosted gear changed everything. A king with a fully realized Red Dragon Emperor in their peerage could dictate whatever they wanted in devil politics. Someone disagrees with them, like, say about their marriage, challenge them to a raiding game. That was how central the games had become to devil life. It would be like a Satan suddenly being allowed to participate in raiding games. Entire political careers had been built on the raiding games. Once Issei had a few years of experience under his belt, the Gremory would have no control over Rias. She could go centuries without marriage if she wanted, and nothing they could do would stop her. She'd just challenge her own parents to a game. It wouldn't be the first time factionalism formed within a pillar house. And that would ruin the Gremory. For devils, with their abysmal birth rates, starting young wasn't just recommended. It was almost a requirement. Just looking at Ria's parents proved it. Despite being a very loving couple over 1,000 years old, they only had 2 children born centuries apart. It was one of the reasons arranged marriages were so common, to ensure devils had at least one child before they inevitably did something that got them killed. When you are one of 3 parties in the greatest war ever fought, you need to keep up the numbers. Especially if you are a devil with a bloodline. For Rias, who had the power of destruction, one of the most coveted bloodlines in the underworld, the idea that she wouldn't have a child for centuries or millennia was terrifying for the remaining pillar families. Already, they were being outnumbered by reincarnated devils 10,000 to 1. Rias's parents cared for her and loved her. They really did. They were kind to her, spoiled her, and took her peerage in as family. But they also had a duty to see that the remaining 31 pillar houses did not shrink further. They still loved each other and had been in an arranged marriage when they were young. They did not understand her reluctance, but they were out of time to try and convince her. So they pushed and pushed and pushed. And now, pushing was no longer enough. Instead of nagging, they were being more overt. Forget letting Rias graduate college. They wouldn't even let her graduate high school. That was how terrifying a boosted gear holder was. There was only one thing Rias could do now. The one recourse all high-class devils had. A rating game. Everyone knew it. The question was how long Rias could delay it. To give the peerage more time. There were other more desperate ploys, but that was the only one that was sure to stop the marriage and not lead her into disgrace. Right now, the entire peerage was strong. Rias' added practice in order to grow strong enough to reincarnate Eren had spurred on the growth of the rest. Akeno had no doubt that even without Issei or Asia, the 4 of them would absolutely decimate Riser's little harem. But Riser himself? And his sister? None of them were strong enough to ensure they'd be able to beat him enough to force him to retire. Especially not if they had to deal with his peerage as well. Even if Rias could beat him a dozen times, it didn't matter if he healed 24 times. The extra power and training gave them a chance, but it was incredibly small. If only... You're lying. Akeno asked, having fallen into deep thought once more. You're lying, Eren repeated, fully frowning. I know you're bullshit when I hear it. There's something we, or at least you, can help her with, isn't there? Yes, Akeno admitted with a cavalier shrug of her own. What was the harm in admitting that? Eren already knew she was a rotten, terrible woman. There is something I could do to help my best friend, but I won't. Safe in the knowledge that Eren couldn't see them, Akeno let her wings free. One of them was bat-like, leathery, and angular. The wings of a devil. The other was larger. Black as night, with soft feathers that glittered in the sun like polished obsidian. The wings of a fallen angel. As with every time she saw that thing, accursed proof of what she was, Akeno could not stop her hands. Blood flowed across her fingers as she tore fistfuls of feathers from her flesh. The pain was an old friend. Why not? Eren asked in that empty voice of his. There was no judgment in his voice, but no curiosity either. Akeno didn't know what he was feeling. All she was feeling was the familiar sting of self-disgust. Because I am a terrible person, Akeno said airily like she was talking about the weather, as she tore another handful of soft feathers from her wing. She was not gentle. They floated to the ground, slick with blood. I would rather let my best friend, my sister in all but blood, be consigned to a terrible fate because I cannot stand the idea of using anything from that man. Because I am the worst woman to ever live. No, you are not. I am, Akeno laughed hollowly another fistful. The wing was gaining bald spots now. From experience, Akeno knew she wouldn't stop until it was completely bare flesh with no feather in sight. Until there was no proof of what she was. I am a terrible woman. The worst, vilest creature to exist. I am my father's daughter. The parents' crimes should never be passed on to their children, Eren sighed, unseeing the self-mutilation happening on the bench beside him. I cannot claim to not hate people due to their ancestors or where they were born, but children are guiltless. Simply casualties in the wars and sins of grown-ups. Whatever your father did is not your fault, no matter what people have told you. I hate him, Akeno bit out, glaring at the boy. I hate him. He wasn't there. My mom died because he wasn't there to protect her. I don't know the circumstance, so I can't say if it was or wasn't his fault, Eren shrugged. Sometimes, Akeno absolutely despised how blasé he could be. As if every story he was told was one he had heard before. He should have been there, Akeno insisted, voice rising despite Eren's serenity. All I will say is that a husband not knowing his wife is in danger doesn't make her death his fault. Even if he could have stopped it if he were there. He didn't kill her. There was something there. Under the cavalier attitude and blank voice, there was something Eren was hiding. It was only because she knew him so well that Akeno could notice. It was what prompted the next words. He didn't, Akeno laughed bitterly. Tears of anger, loathing, and resentment filled her eyes. I did. Eren froze. What? I killed her, Akeno repeated, the words falling out of her. Years of built-up guilt and disgust burst out of her. They came for her because of me. Because she married my father and had me. They killed her because she wouldn't give me up. At her core, Akeno was a rotten woman who hated herself more than she hated the Fallen or Barrakiel. It was her fault her mother was murdered. Her existence had pushed the clans to send their assassins after the family while her father was away. If her parents had simply been wed and never had a child, Shuri Hanjima would still have been an outcast, but she would have lived. The taint on their legacy, the mixing of sacred blood with that of the Fallen, had caused her death. And now? Now, Akeno could help Rias if she was willing to use her unique heritage. Holy Lightning. Barrakiel's signature ability. It would counter Phoenix's regeneration and practically guarantee their victory and Rias' freedom, turning a 10% chance at victory into a 90%. Yet every time Akeno tried to pull up that part of herself, tried to will even the tiniest of sacred energy into her electricity, all she could think of was her mother's murder, of her dying face, and the guilt would sap everything from her. Akeno could still hear the blades entering flesh, the scream of pain, the urging of her dying mother, begging her to run, to live. In her nightmares, she was still on the streets of Japan, barely surviving as her mother's last words rang out over and over and over in her mind. Those were the better ones. Others were just a repeat of the event. No changes, no embellishments. Shuri Hanjima never blamed Akeno, not even in her dreams. The worst of the dreams was when Akeno saw what could have been. The what if of her parents' lives if she had never been born. They were happy. A loving couple living out a quiet life of seclusion. A happy life without her. Akeno would never use Holy Lightning. She could never use it. Rias never forced her to, or even asked her to, even after all this time, even if it would solve her problem. Akeno loved Rias as much as she hated herself. Hated how her continued existence ruined the lives of those around her. Truly, Akeno Hanjima should never have been born. The punch came out of nowhere, so lost was the hybrid in her self-hatred and guilt. Akeno flew off the bench, tumbling to the ground below, wings splayed in the dirt. "Don't say that," Eren shouted at her. "Don't you dare say that." He was standing, Akeno thought, in a daze of shock. He was off the bench. For some reason, that fact shocked her more than the punch. "Don't you ever say that again." Eren's face, the part not covered in bandages, was twisted in a snarl of fury, the greatest show of emotion Akeno had ever seen on his face. "Just when I think you can't piss me off anymore, you go and spew this crap," Eren snarled. His cane tapped hard on her leg to find her, and he bent down, grabbing the stunned girl by her shirt. The cane fell to the ground as he used both hands to hold her in place, a few inches from his face. "Listen here, you pathetic woman," he growled, practically spitting on her in his intensity. "I don't care about any guilt you feel, how much you hate yourself, or whatever pathetic excuse you have for those words. That crap only matters to you. We're all guilty. But never, and I mean never, say you shouldn't have been born." Eren punched her in the face again. Akeno could have dodged it. She didn't. Akeno fell again as Eren continued to yell. "No matter who you are, what you do, who you kill or don't, none of that crap matters. It didn't matter to your mom. It might not matter to your dad. It doesn't matter to Rias. I certainly don't give a shit. But no matter what, there is one thing that does." Ah. That face. That rage. Had that always been there? Hiding under a man beaten by the world? Had Eren always been this? We all deserve to be born, Eren snarled, smashing a fist to his heart in emphasis. We all deserve to be free to live. That is the only thing owed to everyone in this shitty world. We all deserve that just for being born into this world. Our sole birthright. Even you, the rotten woman that you are. The shouting, the rage, seemed to leave him then as Eren sagged, almost collapsing back to the bench. For a long second, Akeno lay on the ground, utterly shocked. Her hand rose to her cheek where she had been punched. Twice. It didn't hurt. Eren was human and sickly on top of that. As well as being born half-fallen, Akeno was a queen of a devil peerage. Queens didn't get the total bonus to toughness as rooks, but they got a part. It had been momentum more than force or pain that had caused her falls. I don't know if your mom died because of you or not, Eren admitted, panting for breath after the exertion. You didn't kill her. Others did. So get that stupid idea out of your head. If you can't or don't want to use whatever has to do with your father to help Rias, fine. If she needs you to, she'll ask herself. But if I ever hear that Akeno Himejima shouldn't have been born, I will punch you again, and I don't think I'll stop. He was serious, Akeno realized. He really would try to beat her up if she said that again. Akeno couldn't help it. She laughed. She laughed and laughed and laughed and cried. Akeno cried in the dirt, wings splayed wide for the world to see as tears streamed down her face. No hug, not a single kind word. This wasn't some romantic gesture of acceptance. This wasn't Eren acknowledging Akeno for being Akeno, comforting her with the knowledge that he saw her as her instead of her race or heritage. Eren didn't know about fallen angels, about Barakiel and the sacred clans of Japan. He had no idea that Akeno could fry him before he could even throw a punch. And Akeno was sure that even if he did, he'd still punch her. It was so, Eren, that she couldn't help but laugh. You-fu-fu-fu-fu, Akeno chortled, getting to her feet and wiping herself down. She also put her wings away, glad the older boy hadn't noticed. She wiped her tears as she took a seat on the bench. What a brute! To hurt a delicate lady such as myself. Eren snorted. Still, if I remember correctly, I did promise you a reward if you could punch me. What do you say? Want to help me explore my side? Eren sighed, but Akeno was happy to notice it was a familiar one of fond exasperation instead of anger or disgust. I wasn't lying, you know, Akeno admitted softly as she pulled a twig from her hair. It really was because of me that my mother was killed. That isn't hyperbole but fact. I couldn't have stopped it, but she would still be alive today if I had never been born. That doesn't change that nobody's birth is a sin, Eren answered just as softly. No matter what you are or what you become, we all have the right to be born, to live free. What do I do then? Akeno asked helplessly as she collapsed onto the bench beside him. With the guilt? With these memories? The only thing you can, Eren shrugged. You live with them. How you live is up to you, but that doesn't change what happened. So you carry it as you move forward. You make it sound easy. Akeno could admit her voice sounded petulant even to her. It isn't. Eren paused as if giving his following words careful thought. Then he sighed and tilted his face to the sky. I killed my parents. What? Akeno asked, the statement coming out of left field. I thought you were an orphan. I am, Eren acknowledged. That doesn't change that I killed them. I don't mean that they died protecting me or anything like that. I mean, I myself killed them. Nobody else. Did you hate them? Akeno asked, wondering if it had been revenge for leaving him on that church's stoop. No, Eren shook his head. I loved them, dearly, and they loved me, wanted the best for me, worried about me and cared about me, and yet I still killed them. Why? Akeno could see it in her mind. Eren, maybe a young teen, tracking down his parents to demand the truth. Finding them and finding out they had some reason to leave him at that church. A reunion filled with emotions, maybe even a hint of that rage she saw. But then love, acceptance. Perhaps Eren had been happy. For a time. With my father, it was an accident. Completely unintentional. He knew it would happen and chose to let me do it anyway. That's how much he loved me. But my mom. Akeno noticed the slight dampness of the bandages over Eren's eyes, but didn't comment. nor about the thickness in his voice or his clenched fists. I killed my mom. Directly, on purpose, knowing who she was, what I was doing, and what it would lead to. No matter how much I loved her. Eren paused, teeth grit tight enough that Akeno could hear them as his hands tightened on his cane. Her last words to me were, "Don't go." I don't know if she didn't want to die alone, wanted someone to save her, or wished to see her son one last time. I will never know. I still remember her face as I killed her. The fear, the pain, I will never forget that sight. That Shuri's last words had been the complete opposite. Run, Akeno. Run and live. Please live. When I say you will carry the guilt for the rest of your life, I speak from experience. Eren's voice was as heavy as it had ever been. This was a confession to a friend. For all that he claimed that Akeno angered him, Eren would not be confiding in her this terrible secret if he didn't want to reassure her in some small way. To tell her she wasn't alone in her guilt. Not a moment goes by where I do not feel guilty for all I've done. Then why did you do it? Akeno couldn't help but ask. Why did you kill her? Because it was necessary, Eren answered immediately with a gasp that choked a sob. Because it saved the life of a child that I hated. Because I chose a few friends, the future I wanted, over the mother I loved. Because Carla Yeager's death was the start of it all, and it needed to happen if I was to move forward. That's it, Akeno said as she held a hand in front of her face. It was slick with bloody dirt, and a half-torn feather was caught in her nails. Just move forward, no matter how much it hurts. That's terrible advice. It's the only advice I have, Eren shrugged, the emotions of the moment bleeding out of him into that familiar weariness. I can't see your future. Or Ria's. I have no idea what problems you will face or are facing right now. I'll die soon, but I hope you won't. I hope you all lead long, happy lives. To do that, you need to walk forward. Guilt, fear, regret. You will carry them with you all your life, but you must continue on. One step at a time, no matter what. For some reason, her own anger flared at his words, an emotion joining the guilt, the pain, and the self-disgust. You don't get to die, Akeno shook her head as she stared at the dirty blood in her hand. Sauna, Rias, Kaneko, Yuyuto, and I won't let you. Even Issei and Asia won't once you get to know them better. After everything you just told me, you don't get to go off and die. If I have to live with the guilt, so do you. I told you, Eren sighed. I will die alone. He said it with the certainty of a prophecy, a fact that would come true no matter what. No, you won't, Akeno denied fervently. She clenched her fists. You said you couldn't see the future. I'll let you know I come from a long line of Miko, so I will make a prediction right now. Erenyeager will live a long, happy life. Just you wait. Eren clearly didn't believe her, but Akeno didn't care. As he had told her earlier, that was his problem, not hers. If Akeno Heimjima deserved to live, then so did Erenyeager. If he was going to be selfish, so was she. Even if he was a mass murderer who killed his parents, a terrible person, that didn't change who she was. Akeno was a rotten woman to her core. Akeno wasn't going to let anyone else be taken from her. Even if it meant dirtying herself further. The blood and feather disintegrated in a quiet crackle of divine lightning. The tiniest of sparks darkened her flesh and stung with pain. Rias was trusting her. Yuyuto and Kaneko were trusting her. Even Issei and Asia trusted her, looked up, and went to her for guidance. She could hate herself, but she could not let them down. She needed to be there when they needed her. Akeno couldn't be Barakiel. The trauma was still there. The self-loathing, hatred, guilt, and disgust still filled her. It wouldn't disappear with one conversation or affirmation of conviction. If Akeno wanted the strength to keep hold of her family, she would need to face those emotions every day, over and over again, for months, years, potentially for the rest of her life. It was a war of attrition against her own emotions. She'd always carry that guilt. A part would always hate herself. But Akeno took that first tiny step forward. And that was enough, she realized. For now, that tiny, shuffling step was enough. The worst woman in the world sat with the worst man, companions in culpability, in self-hatred, and in pain. Guilty, innocent, it didn't matter in that moment. They were alive. They shared the same birthright as they sat together on the bench. So alright folks, that's all for today. Stay tuned for part 5. Do subscribe, like and share for more such videos. Also check out the story and author Reading Dangerously FANFICTIONnet. Press the bell icon to be notified first on release. See you in the next video. Till then, goodbye.